Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and we are back with migration. And it's been a good time. It has. I'm very satisfied with my results so far. I'm glad I decided to take the opportunity to pull out the old longsword and actually do something at level for the first time, I think, all year. Realistically speaking, did I do a mayhem earlier? No, I think I skipped all the mayhems earlier. Maybe I did Easter. I think I might have done one. I can't remember. No, I skipped it to do summer, and then they freaking canceled Summer Mayhem. That's what happened. Okay. So, yeah. We're having a good time. But I wanted to go into a couple of things today. Things that they've been on my mind for a while, right? Because you know how I operate. I start off, I kind of do an Entropia intro, and then I really focus on more cultural issues, socio-cultural issues, and philosophy. And this is something that I ran across as I'm watching YouTube videos. I'm watching Jordan Peterson's Bible lectures. And something underlying all of the things that are in the stories that he's going through really stopped to make me think, and so I wanted to share that with you today. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Okay, so I am going to talk about something that'll probably make my son, if he decides to try to watch this video, turn it off immediately. I want to talk about responsibility. And this is something that I think a lot of us grapple with every day, right? Because we all have responsibilities. We all have things that we have to do. We have people we're responsible to. We have family obligations, all of that stuff. But it's not necessarily, specific responsibilities. This isn't meant to be an admonition about doing what you're supposed to do because you know you're supposed to do it. First off, it's a dumb idea because you're going to listen to someone lecture you and you're going to turn off your ears and no one's going to care. And that's pretty much what happened to me throughout most of my life. And even today, if someone's trying to tell me about my responsibilities, I'm like, yeah, whatever, Dad. Okay. And I'm 37. So that's not really what I want to go into per se. I want to more go into the foundational aspect of what created the notion of responsibility. Like think about it. If we go back millions of years, the foundational responsibilities of an adult really haven't changed. I mean, if you get down right to the core pieces of it, they haven't changed. What are your basic responsibilities as an adult? You have to be able to maintain a shelter. You have to be able to maintain food, heat when it's cold, and raise your kids if you got them. Insofar as I can tell, those are the four primary responsibilities of an adult. And if I'm missing one, feel free to comment. We can definitely extrapolate on that. But I was thinking about it, and I'm like, so in my home, I've gone through my lifestyle, right? I call myself the white collar woodchuck. I work in an office, but I live a very blue collar lifestyle because I come from a very blue collar family. And so I was thinking about it, and all of the things that we have to do to maintain the home here. It's a 3-generation home. It needs to be a 3-generation home for us to maintain what we have. And that's just a fact, because that's the way that this home and this property has always been. And I never really appreciated it until I came back from North Dakota. But when you drill down, what are the things that we do in order to maintain the home that requires 3? Actually, honestly, it would be better with 4 adults, and we had that right up until my grandmother passed away last year. But we can manage it with 3. Things get a little bit busy at times, but my son's 13 now. He can do some of the stuff, and he's learning his role in maintaining the home, which is the foundation to being able to eventually have his own home and build his own family. And I think that is of vital importance that he learn these things. And like any 13-year-old, he's not thrilled with the matter. He's like, well, why the hell do I have to mow the lawn? You're perfectly capable of doing it. It's like, well, yeah, I am, but, I can't mow the lawn and, mop the floors at the same time, and there's only 24 hours in the day, so we got to split the work up. So, but realistically, the foundational the foundational responsibilities of an adult haven't functionally changed. The method that we go about maintaining them has, but the foundational, shall we say, the abstract responsibilities have not changed. And so, and I think that's very interesting because, everyone, all of us, me especially, we talk about, what our rights are and what we should have and what we are entitled to through our work, but we don't really think about the responsibilities that come with it. And so, as an example, the one that I get hit with a lot, everyone knows that, I'm a gun owner and I have a few of them, and, they talk about, well, you want the right without the responsibility. It's like, no, wrong. The reason I carry is because of my fundamental responsibility to protect myself and my family. Similarly, I go to work every day because I'm responsible to keep a roof over my son's head so I can raise him in such a way where he has Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I need to be able to give him an environment where he is not thinking only of survival and can climb up the hierarchy of needs. And so, those are the foundations. And like, where did these notions truly come from? And it's true of any animal. Like in any species, these are the 4 things they have to contend with in order to survive. You got to find shelter and maintain it. You got to find food and water. But I'll put that with food because it's sustenance. You have to be able to raise your children if you have them. And I thought I had a 4th one. And you have to keep them all safe. It's like, okay, so how do you do that? Well, in the past, we lived in villages, and those villages would be organized in such a way where families, like my ancestors, one branch of my ancestors were Iroquois, so they lived in longhouses. And so in these longhouses, you'd have multi-generational families. And so you'd have like 3 or 4 generations, and they live in the longhouse. And each sibling, every time a sibling got married, they'd add a portion to the longhouse so that sibling's family could expand into the longhouse. And they divided the work up, and back then things were very based in more primitive gender roles. So the men went out hunting and the women went out gathering and raised the kids. And in a lot of ways, that really hasn't changed too much in 1,000 years, but it has. I mean, life has gotten a lot more egalitarian, and that's okay. But the idea is that they saw the things that they had to do in order to make things work. And they realized that one person can't do all of these things and manage to do more than just those things to survive. And so beyond the necessity for propagating the race, the human race, the human species, is the notion that, those responsibilities are really the core foundation of what created the idea of family. Because you take on a mate, right? And I mean, theoretically, if you didn't have any responsibilities, you just mate, and then, unfortunately, because in our species, women bear the burden of pregnancy, they'd also end up bearing the burden of rearing the child. And I mean, the more things, change, the more they stay the same. Unfortunately, it's become more and more prevalent in the modern world, although not universally true. There are single fathers, including myself, out there who are custodial and have their children, but the overwhelming majority of single parent families are mother only. And so it's like that breakdown of responsibility. And in a single parent home, and I don't care if it's a same-sex couple or not, a single parent home struggles almost universally because there isn't enough adult labor in the house to maintain the home properly and raise the kids. And it's really interesting to watch the difference. And I'm very fortunate that I live in a multi-generational home, that I'm able to I was able to divide that work with my parents and my grandmother when she was alive, so that um, I could fulfill my portion of the responsibility and not have to take on the burden of all of it, which is something I would have done in as a single father. I would have taken on gladly, but it's hard work, man. I can't imagine if it was just the two of us, how much harder things would be. And that really is the undergirding of that responsibility, because it's that responsibility that is desperately necessary in order to, let's say, actualize ourselves in the real world. And I mean, what do we do with that? That's a kind of a strange notion if you think about it, because what is the first great thing that we do as adults? We try to find ways to avoid responsibility when we're not required to take it, right? And I mean, kids do this too, and kids are far better at it than adults are, because they're still learning how to be adults and learning what all of it means, and they don't really understand why they necessarily have to do this stupid chore. I mean, it's 15 minutes away from whatever it was I was doing, whether it was drawing or playing computer games or whatever. But realistically, it really builds into them the foundation of that sense of purpose. And I think that there's a lot of that's a very important lesson to teach your children. And I'm learning that I never appreciated it. Of course I didn't appreciate it, but I never appreciated that fact until I was a father. I never did. And I never appreciated just how much of a person's life goes into fulfilling those 4 foundational responsibilities. And so what? How do we extrapolate from those 4 foundational responsibilities that create the world around us today? Because it's no longer a matter of family groups and tribes, right? Because that's what a tribe basically is. It's an extended family group. And you talk with other tribes and you negotiate so that you can have genetic diversity among the tribes, and that's there's a lot of utility to that, because you don't want to have incest going on. That's bad. And we've got plenty of historical evidence to prove that. Just to look at Egypt and know that intermarriage, especially repeated intermarriage over generations with 2 closely aligned bloodlines, it ends up with terrible results. But you have these tribal groups, and they're essentially extended families, and they all share the responsibility of building the family group, because that's what they had to do. That's how they ensured that they themselves and their own children survived. And your siblings, you love your siblings even when you're fighting each other. I mean, Cain and Abel aside, and so you help them raise their kids, and sometimes you trade off. And I know that when I was a child, and my brother was, when we were kids, when my mother needed to do something, we would go to a cousin's house and they'd take care of us. And then when our cousins needed to do things, then we would take their kids. And we were all roughly the same age groups. I was roughly the age of the older one, although he is a number of years younger than I am. We were closer in age, and then my brother and our cousin's younger child was were almost identical age. I think they were only a year apart, and so we would get together and we'd play. And as far as we were concerned, this was an awesome arrangement, because we get friends to play with twice a week, and as far as they were concerned, it was awesome, because they traded babysitting responsibilities so that they could go further their ability to fulfill the foundational responsibilities, because both of the mothers were in college. Which there's an argument to be had there. It's like, well, why do you need to go beyond those 4 basic responsibilities? And I think that's a great question, but I think it's a very it's a meaningful question if you ask it honestly. But I think it's also, for lack of a better term, it's a low resolution. It's 8-bit. That is an 8-bit question. That's what I'm going to call it. That is an 8-bit question. Why do you need to go beyond the basic responsibilities? And this is something that as a 20-something I had a hard time contending with, because I was constantly asked, why won't you just settle for the good that we have? And I didn't have a good answer at the time. And unfortunately, I made the mistake of just accepting that as a good result. And that's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. Because when you just accept just good enough, all too often something slips and the just good enough becomes not enough. And so you have to continually try to build yourself up and grow to create a buffer between you and catastrophe. And so that's why, like, when we were kids, the mothers went to college and they had classes on different nights so that they could trade off babysitting. And that's very much the tribal or extended family mentality, when you share responsibilities between individual nuclear family groups among extended family groups. And it never occurred to me before just how much that played into those ancient structures that we have. Because, I mean, human society has been developing for a million years at least. And we've been utilizing these structures almost entirely consistently up until the early 21st century. Only now has it really begun to alter in any significant form. And I don't know that that's a good thing. Like, we need to evolve, right? Progress is important. Development is important. We need to evolve and become better than we are today. But at the same time, we can't just offload the things of our past. And I don't know where it is where the things are important because that's how we survived for so long and we don't need them anymore, or that they're vitally important because they are a fundamental process that we as human beings have to use in order to live a fulfilled life. And that's tough, man, because, you know, as our lives get easier, technology has made life really, really easy. We've had a lot of good things come our way, right? We've had a lot of good things come our way, and life has changed significantly just in the last 20 years. I mean, actually, 37, it's been almost 40 years. Almost 40 years ago, okay, I was thrilled to get my Nintendo, we'll call it 30 years ago. 30 years ago. I was born 37 years old. I shouldn't make myself older than I am. 30 years ago, I was thrilled to get my Nintendo Entertainment System. Okay? That was awesome. And you hooked it into a television, and these pictures came up on screen. You had the little zapper, and it flashed the screen, and it shot the ducks. And if you missed the ducks, the stupid-ass dog jumped up and laughed at you, right? Only dog that won't go to heaven is that asshole dog. And so the technology, like back then, compared to now, life was hard. Life was immeasurably harder back then because we didn't have the convenience of today. You know, in order to call someone, you had to use the damn rotary phone. And like my best friend in school, his mom had a cord that was like 100 feet long so she could walk around the house and talk on the phone if she needed to. Okay? And I know that there are some of you who have never seen a rotary phone. But no shit, that's what it was. And it was attached to the wall, and you had to spin the dial around and it went. And that's what dialed the phone. And if you had to call someone, you couldn't figure it out, you'd call the operator. Back when calling collect actually meant something. I can mentally visualize some of the older ones in my channel nodding their heads knowingly. And because things were so much harder, responsibilities were so much tougher to fulfill. And even more important than they are today. Because we didn't have the safety nets that we have today. Whether they're technological or governmental, we didn't have those safety nets. So being able to contend with your responsibilities was so much more vital to survival in the 80s and 90s. And to a certain extent, I think that we've lost something because we don't need to do that anymore. And I think that might in fact be one of the biggest problems we have today, is that we aren't made to be We aren't required to be responsible for ourselves. And I think that's a philosophical problem. I don't think that's necessarily a, that's not a problem that's constructed, although in a lot of ways it is. That is a philosophical problem, because we have come into a world where you don't have to be responsible. And I think that that's why we lack meaning. I think that's why there's so many, young people that kind of wander around aimlessly because they haven't been told to do something. They don't have to work hard in order to maintain their own lives. And it boggles my mind, because like I'm not a simple person. I lead I'm not even sure if you could call it a simple life. But I lead an older style of life, despite the fact that I spend half my time on the internet, oftentimes bitching about things. Which, I think there's a certain amount of, there's a certain irony in that I'm able to do this, and I'm living in, compared to some places in the middle of nowhere, although I have ready access to an urban environment, I'm far enough out to where I don't even hear the cars, And it's kind of like, so Cyberpunk 2077. There is a reason, if you go watch my live stream replays on that, there is a reason that I felt most at home in that game when I was among the Aldecaldos. They lived in the dust, in tents, okay, off generators. Relatively simple life. But they had to work hard, and they were responsible, and they contended with in order to be free, they contended with the difficulties that freedom required. And there was something very liberating about seeing that in a game like Cyberpunk, which is a terribly dystopian future, and one that I'm afraid that we are moving into very, very quickly. But I was watching, and I'm like, I could live like this. I could live like this, and I know I could live like this because it's not terribly far off from how I live today. They just like cars more. And I mean, I don't dislike cars, and they're not my jam per se, but I don't dislike cars. They're just, but they work on machines, and they build themselves up, and they live off the land, and they take responsibility for their own future. But you go into the city, and there's a whole bunch of aimless people who are living off of whatever pleasures they can get, on the day-to-day, and they work their meaningless existences. And maybe I need to do another playthrough where I really explore the philosophical underpinnings of Cyberpunk 2077, because it's a very complex game. If you look at, for all the problems that Cyberpunk had, it really addressed the problems in today's society without addressing them. It did it culturally. It looked at the culture and where the future of such notions could lead. And I think that the fact that they did it the way they did it is horribly underappreciated. And I didn't even appreciate it until I was thinking about it here. And, I very much played it in a very Grand Theft Auto fashion, which I'm kind of chagrined at, but at the same time, I thought it was a lot of fun to kind of do it that way. And, there's definitely a certain amount of blowing off steam you can do playing like that. I think that's a very useful method of playing certain types of video games, aka Cyberpunk 2077. Especially since, for whatever reason, every time I park a car, except that one damn truck, they would always disappear by the time I left the building, which was very annoying, by the way. Fix that, CD Projekt Red. But if you look at the two cultures between the people who lived in the city and those who lived without, it was very, very different. I think that there's a certain amount of firm allegory for lifestyles today if you were to abstract and to extrapolate all of the most extreme notions of the two lifestyles. And I'm not saying that urban life is bad, because there were people who did take care of themselves in the city, like I think his name was Saburo back before he died. The old guard for the elder Arasaka. And he took responsibility, And he took responsibility by saying it was my responsibility to take care of Arasaka-sama, and I failed. And so I need to find out who did it, because that is my responsibility to the Arasaka family and to the daughter of the Arasaka. And I found that to be very profound. It's very profound. Very few people today, in my generation especially, and I think it's going to be even worse in my son's generation, would ever even deign to think like that. So, I don't know. I mean, it's a problem, but it's a problem that I don't know has an easy... It's a problem that doesn't have an easy solution. There's no possible way for it to have an easy solution. And unfortunately, that means that no easy solution will be found. We are going to have to figure out how to solve that problem, because extracted over generations, it's only going to take 4 generations for everything to just fall apart. And I don't know how to fix it. So, I don't know. You guys leave comments. I am so happy that as many people watch this as they do. So please, by all means, leave a comment and let me know what you think about what I just said. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. And tell me why I'm wrong. Or how I'm wrong. Because honestly, I want to be wrong on this. And I would love to engage in the conversation, so yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. And as always, I really appreciate the support, and I'll see you in the next one.